Hola, bienvenidos, bienvenidas, welcome. I call to order the work session of the Beaverton School Board on February 11th, 2025 at 6:03 p.m. I want to note that all 7 board members are present in person. The first topic of our work session this evening is the superintendent's mid-year report. So Superintendent Valderas.
So thank you, and I'll go through this. In front of you on the dais is the evaluation process, but also the goals for the year. And I'm going to just provide a quick update. And my hopes within the week or so is to provide you a more of a condensed version of all the accomplishments that we've done as a district for your review. And I know the board is going to overtake an evaluation process that board leadership's working on in terms of trying to schedule that out with the board. And we can talk a little bit about that as well. But for area responsibility for engaging and teaching learning systems, I'm on number 1 here in terms of the specific targets, and really proud of the work that staff have done in terms of implementation of universal academic and behavioral screeners district-wide. The system has not had consistency in the past, so we have STAR Early Literacy for K1, STAR Reading 2 through grade 2 through 12, STAR Math 2 through 12, and MySaber Social, Academic, and Emotional Behavioral Screener as well. So that's something that we've done and continue to do. So we're going to continue to move forward with that. Just really proud of the work that's been done and the data. And I think when the board's visited schools, I think you've had opportunity to see that in action when talking to staff. And again, and I'll get you a summary of all this. This is more verbal, but just want you to go through. So I'll give you all the things that we've done. In the curriculum process, in the process selected K-5 language arts materials and are working on a material selection process for 612 right now as well for language arts. So that's something that people are doing, and we really appreciate the board and to be able to provide that. It is costly. It's a costly endeavor in the system because it's a big system, and it costs not just for the professional development, for the curriculum, but for the professional development. Dual language expansions. We've opened up Jacob Wismer for Chinese immersion this year, and we'll continue to expand out the grade levels for the other schools. And next year, we're going to be just adding grade levels for each of the current programs. So no, we're not going to expand out in terms of the district, adding more another school, but we are going to be expanding grade levels within the schools. And we are looking at other heritage programs possibly that Tashiko and the multilingual department under the direction of guidance of Heather Cordy, Dr. Cordy, are working towards. So that's something that we're excited about. And the Mandarin Chinese programs is if you, I know some of the board members have visited, is if you visit the first week compared to the last week of school, you see a big difference. So I'd like to have the board members at some point in time maybe go in the spring just to go visit and see the language the kids pick up. It's pretty amazing how a year's growth happens really fast for the little guys. It's pretty amazing. So, and career technical education is another big effort that we're working through. And we've collaborated more with both Washington County and the Beaverton Chambers of Commerce to be able to expand programming. And our goal is to look at regional business partners to make sure that our programs are aligned and articulated to the area businesses and also within the framework of our own system. So we have articulated programs that feed. Our goal is to be really K-12 with project-based learning, hopefully at the elementary level, followed by middle and high school, but more of an alignment to the community and more intentional. And also to be able to provide kids who want to stay local the opportunity to do that and earn a living wage locally. Because again, not all kids want or need to go to college. I think that's something that is very something that it's everything cycles in education, and this is another one of those cycles. So I know Heather is working with her department on an articulated plan for this in the future. So be expecting something for the board to be able to consider as we continue to expand programming. Had a pleasure of visiting the Auto Tech program at Aloha High School with some of the board members, and I know that that's one of the programs that there's a strong business partnership aspect to that that we're excited to hopefully expand that program as well, more of a regional hub model, because again, those kids go from us sometimes right to the local dealerships and earn a high wage. In early learning, the continued expansion of PK programs, and hoping to support that with the addition of Raleigh Park. When Raleigh Park comes open, that's going to be Raleigh Park has a program, a PK program right now, and we're looking to expand that out also with Raleigh Hills. When Raleigh Hills opens up, they'll also have an expanded PK program there. So I know I'm going through this really fast, but again, you'll get a summary and you'll have plenty of time to review this prior to the next time we talk about this. The community engagement piece. We do have, this is something I know the board's talked about for a few years, but we've started our student board rep program this year. So we're excited to have our student representatives have more student voice and continue to make that, maybe look to, again, this is going to be a process where our goal is to have all the high schools rotate through, all the comprehensive and option programs be able to rotate through in a period of a few years. We will continue to have community meetings. I think that's something with our coffee chats and a variety of committees, from the Wellness Policy Committee, Curriculum Advisory. We have a Generative AI Committee that Steve has spearheaded, and of course our Budget Committee. We just have a lot of committees in the system and want to engage our community as much as we can. Liaison with staff. We do have quite a few staff engagements throughout the year, and internal communications with staff as best we can. Recently, we started a program to recognize folks called the BSD Achievers, and my hope is to invite the board to your regions, to your area, to be able to see that in action, because it's recognizing staff out in schools. And we've had our first initial recognition at, I think it was 4 schools we did in one day. And it was really, really well received by the staff and community. And it was done differently. I think that's what makes it different too. It was done differently. It was done sometimes in one of the elementary schools. It was done with the person's class in a cafeteria, and the kids were all there. And the other one was a full assembly with the community. So it's nice to be able to, again, continue to recognize our hardworking staff that we have. And partnerships, we have a lot of partnerships. I think that's the power of Beaverton, from the foundation that provides us a lot of supports. You know, this past year, I think we have over 2,700 gift cards to provide for families. And Wake Up Beaverton, Jefferson Child's Group, 2,800 backpacks and materials for folks. And I can keep going on and on for all the things. And you'll get this, but again, just a lot of community engagement that provides support for our community. And also just in communication with the school board, our weekly memo. This is something that we started when I arrived in terms of a more comprehensive memo and monthly meetings with board members and communication when needed if there's a crisis that does occur. So moving fast, because I know we have special ed department here waiting to provide some input for you and some recognition about how we place students. Our facilities program. I have big papers. I have big papers because I have bad eyesight. So our long-range facilities planning process is continuing, and again, this is something that will be brought to the board about a year or so, and looking at just more than anything, looking at how we want to look like as a district moving forward, whether it's more articulated K-12 programs where all kids from the specific elementary school goes to a middle school, goes to a high school. Right now they're broken up. The kids they leave at certain grade levels and can come back to certain grade bands. So, or look at reboundary possibly, because we do have some anomalies in terms of some of the school sites I haven't looked at for a while. There's some lines that maybe could be reviewed and recommended to be redrawn to make sure there's more equity in terms of how we are placing kids and by size. So that's something that's going to continue. We have adjusted the facility use practices and support system, so we're going to continue to do that. I know that was a concern with some of the community with regards to how they reserve our fields, reserve our classrooms, and so forth. And we've seen an 8% increase in usage because of some slight adjustments this year of our facilities, and we hope to have even more adjustments and be able to really look at just look at the cost, reduce the cost to access our buildings, to support our community and our kids. I know that my first year, I met with a Girl Scout troop, I think 4 times, and they were the most organized kids. They were very organized, and they had a plan, and were strong advocates. So that's something that this is when it first caught our eye. So we've been working on that. Bond projects are on time and on budget. We have Beaverton High, Raleigh Hills Elementary, as well as security upgrades, seismic upgrades, and deferred maintenance. That's something that we're going to continue to focus on. For the seismic upgrades, we completed seismic upgrade project at Five Oaks and began a seismic project at Mountain View. So that's something that we are continuing to plan for our additional middle school seismic upgrades to fulfill the bond commitment as we move forward. The security upgrades, talking about acronyms, there's a lot of acronyms in education. The DAS, the distributed antenna system, to make sure that we're able to have repeaters in our systems. Basically, if your cell phones or computers sometimes don't work inside because there's a lot of brick. So if you go into a building, you go, I can't get out, I can't make a call. So you need repeaters inside the building to make sure that there's connectivity. So that's something that we're working towards. But really proud of the work at Beaverton High School. If you go by Beaverton High right now, look at it. It's been a lot of tremendous build out in a short time, as well as Raleigh Hills. So that's something that we're going to continue to focus on, and we do have live updates. I believe. I think we have the cam up, and you can look at how that's happening. The effective systems and structures for student success. The board will, in the very near future, will be getting a board policy that talks about our personal mobile devices, which could include, again, cell phones. It could include your watches or earbuds, and that's been something that we've been working on for a while. There is over 6,500 parent responses to the survey. There is 3,700 student responses and roughly 1,100 staff responses. I think that's the most activity I think we've had for a survey in the memory of the system for a survey response. So very, very active. So that be prepared to be able to get something there in front of the board. And as you saw in a recent board meeting, we launched our dashboard display of key strategic initiatives, and I know we're working on maybe also looking at more. It was asked recently about attendance, make it more live, so that it's more live to the community. And that's something that we're working on as well, so people can actually look at what's live that week in terms of attendance by school. So that will be helpful for all folks to really understand live data. ERP's moving forward. That's something that in the software system, we did launch New Horizons in November in HR, and that's something that's playing out. But the ERP system is something that's going to take time and energy. And I told Executive Director Steve Lanford that he couldn't retire until that's over. So he's not going to retire until that's done, but that's kind of a legacy item for the system. It's been about 20 years. It's over 20 years, so 25 years that we've needed one since we last adopted. So something that we're going to continue to work on. And lastly, the equity and excellence for all. I apologize here. Shelley Reggiani and the equity team have been training folks regarding sessions 4 and 5 of our Engage in Equity training for certified staff, and we're going to continue to train as many staff as we can with the limited time that we do have. So I really want to thank the team that's been doing all the trainings for all folks, and the goal really is to have all staff have a baseline of understanding so that we can move forward and differentiate in terms of what the needs are for staff in terms of understanding equity. I know the board recently heard some of that at a recent meeting regarding bias training and so forth. And hiring, proud that our staff, under the leadership of Susan, who recently also announced her retirement at the end of the year. I know I let the board know, so she'll be greatly missed at the end of the year, but a lot of great work done in terms of this area. Right now, 25% of all BSD staff come from diverse backgrounds. So 25% of all the BSD staff. That's 24% of administrators, 17% of licensed staff, and 35% of classified staff. And this year, we have 33.5% of our staff that we've hired come from diverse backgrounds. So we're making adjustments every year to increase and be that focus, to try and be reflective of our student population, which is important. The kids have to be able to see themselves in the people in front of them in classrooms, leading their buildings, in any part of their education. So that's something we're going to continue to do. I know I went really fast through that, but again, you will get this paper that I've been reading off of and this to you in a very near future in an email to the board. So are there questions I can answer right from the top? I know it's a lot, and I know that leadership's going to be reviewing the process later on.
I was thinking about, like, for our community, to think about the board policy actually has us formally evaluating the superintendent his performance once a year. And then our board has tied his evaluation to the strategic plan. So there's 5 key areas of the strategic plan that what Dr. Balderas was reading through were 21 different items that he has identified as important to his evaluation that are directly connected to the strategic plan. So the way that this process works is that we have 2 executive sessions where initially he brings to us what he will work on with respect to the 5 key areas of our strategic plan. And then we as a board meet in executive session and can ask questions and give feedback on those items as he's pointing them out to us. And then we have a timeline of that happens in the fall. And then January, February, he brings this mid-year report that we'll get, and we'll have time to kind of take a look at it ourselves with more details of where he is so far on those items. And then in April, we'll be able to review the process to see if there's the timeline or the instruments that we're using, we want to change that, or if we want to continue what we're doing. And then in April, May, the superintendent meets with the board again in executive session to provide a self-evaluation where the board itself will take a look at where he's at, and then he steps out and we have a discussion on that evaluation. And then as our steps is that we actually have those conversations about where is he, what do we see. So far in the last, since I've been chair, we've had favorable evaluations. There's obviously things that the board will point out as areas that we'd like him to continue to improve or work towards. And then when we get the next, set of evaluation for him, those items are identified as key areas of focus. So that information the chair and the vice chair will summarize and bring that to the community again. Not in as much detail of what we do in our executive session where each board member has voice and providing feedback, but we do also want to get that out to our community so that our community knows that we have this rigorous evaluation process in the sense of if you think about your own personal jobs, if you had a 21-point evaluation where you have to explain multiple times a year where you're moving on your evaluation, and then you're getting feedback from 7 different people in that, I would say that is, to me, a pretty rigorous process with 7 different voices at the table for you to think about with all that feedback. So just wanted to share that with our community.
And it's also based on a strategic plan, so the way
Yeah.
it typically works is we create the strategic plan. The board, of course, can adjust the strategic plan and the work goals. I think that's what was brought up earlier in terms of how are the goals created and co-created, which is a great opportunity for us in the fall when we have a new board seated to be able to look at that in August, to look at what goals you want me to work on. And then from there, I develop my goals that I present to you in terms of what's doable, and those become the staff work goals. So it flows to the staff, and then the mid-year from staff to me, to you, and back and forth. And if there's any hiccups, like for example, a hiccup would be March 2020. March 2020, COVID hit. Everything kind of stalled out. We would come back and say, hey, this all goes here, all focuses on here. and work with the board on the rationale why.
And one of the things I remember from my first year on the board is that we had a training and it talked about the most highly effective districts have superintendent, or they have a strategic plan that the community builds and has input on. And then we want to focus the superintendent's goals on the strategic plan so that we're moving that forward. And then that builds into our school improvement plan so that the school improvement plans tie into our strategic plan. And each layer of work that we do as a district tying into the strategic plan is what's going to make the difference in moving those criteria, those identified points forward. So just wanted to reiterate for our community the process and that we follow and the thoughtfulness that goes into it and how that has come about. So, anything else? Tammy?
Clarification, maybe for leadership on the timeline. It says January, February, superintendent mid-year report, which we just had, and then also January, February, board meets with superintendent in executive session. Are we going to do that executive session in February?
Oh, I was thinking when we were talking with Justice to do that next meeting because we want to also talk separately about the contract and explain that to the board.
Okay.
So
we will be talking about the employment contract because that is coming up.
we
at
would
the end
talk
of
about
March.
it in the next executive session, which would be at the next meeting.
Okay, so we will talk about it, the employment contract before that employment contract would need to be signed again. I just want to clarify.
Yeah, no problem. That employment contract is a 3-year evergreen contract, so that continues
Yep. So
to roll over.
I totally understand what an evergreen contract is, and it's only evergreen if the board declines to review it, because it does expire, and it will automatically review unless the board chooses to evaluate it and just make sure that it's still working for us. So it's technically evergreen if we don't do anything, but it will have to be signed by you and Dr. Balderas at the end of March is the way I read it. So I would just like to offer that as a discussion point for the board.
Okay, well, Justice and I can talk to you if you'd like. It doesn't, it's not expiring, because the evergreen contracts don't expire, but there are points if there are things like in the evaluation process where we feel like, either Dr. Balderas says, oh, I want to move on, or we have something we want to change, or he has things that he wants to change in the contract. Those are pieces that he can bring up forward to us. And so he and Justice and I have been having some of those conversations, and we'll bring that to the board at the next meeting.
Perfect. So Dr. Balderas could bring forward things that he would like to change, and the board could also bring forward things that we would like to change in the employment contract. So we will have an opportunity to discuss that ahead of the next year of the contract.
I think with Justice and I, we're looking at the next executive session being at the meeting, but at the next meeting.
Okay, so we would have time to do that and have any changes made before the contract would automatically renew.
I guess, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. So with that, we will move to our next item. And this is an item that I know our board has been asking us. I know Ghana had asked for us to bring the topic, and a couple other board members around what is the process for special education referral and evaluation. So it's something that is coming straight from our board as well. So welcome, Dr. Cordy. We'll let you get started.
Good evening. Thank you. Superintendent Balderas, Board Chair Perez, members of the board. I am here with our special education leadership team and 2 of our amazing licensed staff members, a school psychologist and a learning specialist who I'll introduce here in a moment. This team has the opportunity to share with you this evening some of the details and misconceptions and processes, all of the things as it relates to the special education referral process. And so before I turn things over to Lori Crum, I'd like to just introduce our team. First of all, we've got Lori Crum, our Executive Administrator of Student Services. Next to her, Shirley Valladares, Special Education Assistant Administrator. And then we've got Carrie Scott, one of our learning specialists, and Rachel Jury, Special Education Assistant Administrator, Anya Kwasnik, one of our school psychologists, and last but certainly not least, Justin Waltrip, one of our Special Education Assistant Administrators. The team has worked so hard to put together a presentation and a conversation, which is what we're really looking forward to with you in this work session on this topic. And so without any further delay, I will turn things over to Lori Crum.
There we go.
Thank you, Dr. Cordy. Good evening, Board Chair Dr. Perez, Superintendent Dr. Balderas, and members of the board. As the new Executive Administrator for Student Services, I'm really honored that you care enough to ask us questions and want us to give you information about the special education referral process. And I'm especially honored to be here alongside this amazing team. We have come so far this year, and I'm just really proud of us, I have to say. So thank you for your support on that. Our overall goal here tonight is to really guide you through the special education referral process and the evaluation process, address some of the common misconceptions that happen, and then overall just provide you a clearer understanding of how we identify and then support students with disabilities. Of course, we want to look at everything through our equity lens, and that is centered in special education as much, if not more, than anything else we do. We use this equity lens as we build systems to support our students with disabilities, but also on the evaluation and assessment side, which is what we're here for tonight. When we look at whose voice is represented or whose decision does this benefit or burden, how we look at that through this lens is, does the decision of making a student eligible or even evaluating a student for special education, does it benefit or burden the student? Does it close or widen the access or opportunity gap? And we do that through evaluations by ensuring that our assessments are thorough, that they're unbiased, and also considering our district is so culturally diverse, that our assessments are culturally responsive. We look to that so that the approach that we use can help break the predictive link between the student demographic and educational outcomes. We look at our data all year long and then really summarize it at the end of the year to make sure that we're not disproportionately representing any group of students. And if we are, we really need to keep looking at those systems. And so that's kind of what we're doing now. The reality is that special education comes with as many misconceptions as it does acronyms. Dr. Balderas talked a few minutes ago about acronyms in education. I think probably 80% of those, a statistic I just made up, are come from the special education world. And there's some common ones on this slide, but one of the biggest that we hear is that special education is only for students who are really, really impacted with a disability. But we just want to be clear that in reality, we serve a wide range of students with diverse needs, just like our general education colleagues do. In fact, over 50% of our students that receive special education services qualify under categories that are considered mild to moderate, thinking of like specific learning disability, speech and communication, maybe other health impairment. Ultimately, what I think it's important for our board and whoever's watching this on YouTube to realize that special education isn't a program. It's not a place. It's a service. It's a service for students whose disabilities significantly impact their ability to access and benefit from special education. So making a student eligible or even evaluating is a huge decision that a team needs to make. It's not one that we make just lightly because they might be struggling in math. It is a very serious responsibility, actually, that our team builds on. So my goal, what I got to do is just the overview here. I seem to do that a lot in my job these days, is we're going to walk you through the referral process step by step. But to bring the process to life, we have Carrie and Anya, who are going to take you through a real-world example of a student who went through the referral process. So you can take these words that we're saying and apply it with a student. But generally, a referral to special education begins after our general education colleagues have dug in and done a bunch of research-based targeted interventions. That's where you've been hearing the MTSS, the multi-tiered systems of supports. We rely on the data and the decisions that they have used through the intervention cycle. And then if and when appropriate, we move forward with the referral. Oops, I went too far. But before we dive into the details, we really need to understand the numbers and the trends. Shirley, will you walk us through the data and give us a general overview?
Thank you, Lori. Good evening, Chair Dr. Perez, board members, and Superintendent Dr. Balderas. Thank you for this opportunity for us to share about the evaluation process. Currently, we have 670 students in the referral or evaluation process, and we will share some data of this school year and last school year to provide some context of our evaluation process. Last school year, we processed 850 referrals, with 678 being found eligible and 172 not eligible for special education services. Approximately 80% of the students that we evaluate for special education are eligible. Next. I will walk you through our timeline for the evaluation process. Special education can seem complex, but it essentially breaks down to 4 key steps, which are all guided by IDEA. So first we start with our referral. That is our general education colleagues trying interventions, and if they're seeing that there's not progress, they might submit a referral or a parent requesting a special education evaluation. After that, we schedule an evaluation planning meeting within a reasonable amount of time. We do realize that evaluation planning meetings may take some time to schedule, and that might be due to several factors. For example, itinerant staff may be supporting multiple sites and then coordinating with different schedules and the days that they're there. Some examples might be like our occupational therapists, speech language pathologists, and psychologists. The district currently has an average of 28 days from the referral to scheduling or holding the evaluation planning meeting. We do try to schedule as quickly as we can and know that this is an area of improvement for the district, and we're exploring ways to streamline this process. If the parent agrees to do the evaluations and provides consent, then we start working on those evaluations. By 60 school days, we meet to go over the reports and determine if the student's eligible for special education. I just wanted to provide you with some big picture as we move through our presentation. Now we'll have Carrie share a case study of special education regarding our referral process.
Thank you, Shirley. Good evening, Dr. Perez, board members, and Superintendent Dr. Balderas. Thank you for the opportunity to share. When I think of referrals, they generally come in 2 ways, through the school or through the parent. But regardless of where they come from, they come entrenched in emotion. It's from somebody that's concerned about a child at our school, in our school district. For the case example I chose, I received a school referral at the beginning of the year from his previous 4th grade teacher. He was a complex case. He'd lived abroad. He was a multilingual learner, receiving ELD services, and there was a lot more about the complexity of who this human was. I started off by doing the same thing I do for all referrals. I looked through his file. So Synergy has a file review system, which allowed me to look at assessments. It allowed me to look at report cards. It allowed me to look at just a whole gambit of things. But our kids are more than ink on paper, so it also meant that I was talking to his ELD teacher, his previous teachers, and his current teacher. At the end of that, I still didn't feel super comfortable. So I met with the current teacher, the 5th grade teacher, and the ELD teacher, and sort of asked them what their thoughts were as people that knew him better, and they didn't feel super confident either. So we decided to do another round of intervention. Still didn't feel super comfortable. So we asked our district's cultural consultants to come, like Anya. It's really important that at every step of the process, the parents are aware of what's happening. So at the end of talking with the cultural consultants, we did decide that it was time to meet to talk about if we should evaluate. That means that then I'm calling the family. It's really important, like I just said, that families have been partners all the way through. So it should never be the first time they're hearing about a concern for their child from me. So I try really hard to make sure that the gen ed teacher is with me, but they've also been in partnership with those people beforehand. I said there's 2 ways. So that's a school referral, the other one's a parent referral. The only difference for a parent referral is that no matter what I'm scheduling that meeting with the parent, we're still looking at all of that information. We're gonna return to this vignette in a second. I hope it adds a little bit more color to the idea of this special education picture. I believe Rachel's going to talk next about some of the pragmatics, and I'll look forward to talking to you guys again in a second.
Good evening, Chair Dr. Perez, board members, and Superintendent Dr. Balderas. You've now received a general overview of the special education referral and evaluation process, including the associated timelines and some big picture data. Additionally, Carrie has provided insight into the referral process from the perspective of a special education teacher. The next section will offer a school-level perspective on the evaluation process. This will include an overview of the evaluation planning meeting, the 60 school day timeline, and the eligibility determination meeting. Anya will now continue the discussion, providing a realistic depiction of what the evaluation process looks like from the school team's standpoint. Anya?
Thank you, Rachel. Good evening, Chair Dr. Perez, Superintendent Dr. Balderas, and board members. The next part of the process is the evaluation planning meeting. This is usually around the time when the first time I get to meet family. And this is when the special education team comes together and we talk kind of about the proposed assessments that we would like to do. It can include cognitive, language, social, emotional. It really depends on the needs of the student and then which ones we will propose. In the case that Carrie shared, right, a 5th grade student who is a multilingual learner, interrupted schooling, these assessments would be, we would consider of doing assessments that are less culturally and linguistically loaded. I think that's a really important part of how we can be more culturally responsive with what assessments we are even proposing to do. At this meeting, this is what we propose, and then we need parents' written permission to move forward. Once we get, also next slide. Sorry, thank you. Once we get permission, that's when our 60 days timeline starts. This time allows me and other people who are evaluating just really time for some thoughtful evaluations. And so this is when we can just, along with completing our assessments, really get input from the people who know the student best, which are family, their family members, and also the teacher. This is where we can administer assessments and interpret the results, and how do we consider someone's identity when we are looking at what these numbers and what this data is showing us. After our evaluation is completed, that's when we write up our reports and then we share it with families. A big hope and goal of mine always is to make sure that evaluation results are accessible and easily understood, which is really challenging because special ed is full of acronyms, and it's overwhelming and it's a lot. So I think that is a hope that we're always doing when we come to the table with families, is how can we make sure that what is being shared really does capture who the student is, and that the families know, like, yes, this is my child. So when we can come together and determine what our next steps and determine eligibility. And so that's where I'm going to pass it back to Carrie, and she's going to kind of share the next part of that process.
Thank you, Anya. I mentioned before that every step of referrals and evaluations can be mired in emotion. I think one of the really hard parts of the process for families can be that their experience of the process feels different than that of the school. While we've been assessing and learning about the student, they have been waiting for this meeting and filling out forms. I think that school can feel like that every day, trusting and waiting. I know there are many ways that we endeavor to make sure families feel like the cornerstone of their child's education as they are, but I suspect it will always be a place of growth. The eligibility meeting exists for a couple reasons. The first is to make sure everyone understands the reports. For the child I described before, that would mean inviting the ELD teacher as well as the required members, such as the evaluators, guardians, and general education teacher. The second is to decide, as that team, if they are eligible. Each eligibility is a little bit different, but they all quietly but poignantly end the same. It asks us, as a team, to mark if there is a lack of appropriate instruction or limited English proficiency that should disqualify their eligibility. Then, individually, we mark and sign our perspectives on whether the student should be eligible. After eligibility, if they are eligible, it is the guardian's choice if the student will be provided an IEP that has been co-constructed by the team under the learning specialist, that's me, direction. I sincerely appreciate this opportunity to share a view into a process that I feel really deeply about. Next, Justin will talk about some of the key takeaways we hope to share.
Thank you, Carrie. Good evening, Dr. Perez, board members, and Superintendent Dr. Balderas. We've presented the foundational components of the special education referral process and how it can play out in a school setting. IDA provides clear guidance on the requirements for special education referrals. So in review, when a referral for special education is made, the school team needs to contact the family to schedule an evaluation planning meeting to consider the evaluation within a reasonable amount of time. At the evaluation planning meeting, the team reviews the student's needs and progress to determine whether an evaluation is needed. If the team determines that the evaluation is needed, and with the written consent of the parent, then the team would move forward with the evaluation process. And to conclude the process, the eligibility team comes back together to determine the eligibility within 60 school days. Next. And so some key takeaways that we want to highlight as we wrap up our presentation here. Students might struggle for a variety of reasons. Disability is just one of those possibilities. Special education referrals can be made by parents, school teams, or anyone that works with the student and suspects a disability. IDEA is clear about the timelines around the evaluation process, and evaluations need to consider the educational needs of the whole child. So at this time, that concludes our presentation, and we would like to open it up to any questions that the board has.
Susan?
First of all, thank you so much. I know this is probably one of the hardest areas to deal with in our school system. And I'm going to own my own biases because I had a daughter that had mental health issues when she was going through school and wasn't able to complete high school because of her mental health issues. And the system unfortunately didn't work for her. So I'm coming from a different perspective. I mean, this was, 4 years ago, 5 years, I can't even think, it's been a while, 5, 6 years ago. I know the system has changed, but that doesn't take away from my concern that there are students out there that don't appear to have a disability that get lost in the system. So I just wanted to raise that concern. I would also say, and I know that a lot of IEPs, and hasn't really been talked about, is federally mandated in terms of how it's done. And I can say from my daughter's perspective, she was sitting in the room, but it was like she wasn't there. So she wasn't being seen. Again, that was several years ago. I don't know how things are now, but I'm hoping that if they haven't changed, that is how I'm hearing things that make me think, okay, it has changed. But I just want to raise that awareness because our kids, need to come first. I'm a parent. I know how emotional I was during that time period. Hard to deal with parents when they're at that high level. I get it. I was on the school board at the same time. So, you hear about ninth grade being on track for graduation, and I kept on thinking about my own child who wasn't attending school, and oh my God, she's not on track to graduate. And the anxiety that I had thinking about that, when we talk about metrics and all of that, that also made it really, really hard. So again, I know that you have probably one of the hardest jobs out there. I just, want to ensure that as we're talking about our students, especially those students who are marginalized in so many different ways, that their voices are being heard.
Thank you. Ugana?
Thank you for your presentation, and thank you, Susan, for sharing that. Coming from a parent who the system didn't work for either, and I've continued to make it express myself abundantly that the system just did not work for my kid, and that forced us to make very hard decisions. That being said, for parents out there who, because I read somewhere that parents can request an evaluation. However, I've heard contrary. I've heard parents saying they want evaluations, but they're not getting it. So where is the disconnect? Are we not making them aware of what their rights are? That's my first question. And should I stop or? And my second question would be, how do you determine eligibility and ineligibility? Are there goals that you set that students meet? If they meet those goals, they are not eligible. And if they don't, they are eligible. I'm curious about how you determine that. Because as parents of special needs, we know our kids better than anyone. And I know when my kid is struggling. So if a parent is saying, I think my kid is struggling, I think my kid needs AYZ, and the school is saying, I don't think he or she needs this, how are we making that determination? Second. Third. And I can stop and let others ask.
Do you want them to answer the first one and then
Yes,
they
go
can
ahead
answer
and
the second
answer.
one? That way,
I can prepare for
you
my
don't-
next.
or address, I guess you don't have to answer if they don't.
Anya, I'll have you help with the second part, Ugana, is that one's closest in my brain, so I'll go with that one first. There's eligibility criteria that is determined by IDEA. There's federal criteria that a team will look at the evaluation results, and there's actually like boxes, and Anya talked about it, and so did Carrie a little bit about like the exclusionary factors. So as a team, people will look, including the families, including the parents, go through the criteria that is set by the federal government, IDEA, and determine if the evaluations that were completed indicate that the student meets or does not meet the criteria. It should be a very objective exercise. Like to determine a student has a disability, you should be following the criteria for a disability. If that's not happening, then that's where we better be coaching some teams to do that. And then your second question was about communicating the process with the parents. Parents are given their rights, what we call their parental rights at the very first meeting. I do think I just actually met with a family not too long ago where if you're not really talking to them about the rights, it seems very overwhelming. Carrie talked about all the emotions that go into, and Board Member Greenberg did too. There's a lot of emotions with a family when you're looking at whether or not their child has a disability. And I think that there are many ways we should be going about talking about the rights with families, because you can't always hear when you're escalated, right? And it can feel a lot of edu-speak when you're given the rights. That said, a parent can absolutely request an evaluation. That doesn't always mean that an evaluation will happen. So it could be that if a parent requests an evaluation, that we all come to the table. We have to have an evaluation planning meeting. That is required by law. We sit around, we look together as a team, including the family, look at the whatever data we have. And we determine from there whether or not the team should move forward with a thorough evaluation and start the evaluation clock. Anya, is there anything else that I missed in that?
I think the biggest thing is the eligibility determination. I think this is where we hope as teams that we can share results, sit with families, and the hope is, right, is that the evaluation results that were completed with a thorough evaluation accurately represents what the family also sees for their child. So when we go over the criteria, similar to what Lori Crum shared, is it's objective, and there's different questions that we answer together as a team.
Now, other than the school teacher or the principal, is there anyone else that parents can reach out to if they suspect that their student need to be in special education? Because what you're telling me, it seems to me that the process is as, streamlined and as seamless as possible. However, what I'm hearing is so different. Parents are frustrated. It's as if they can't get access to anybody. They don't know where to even begin when their students are struggling. So I'm hearing one thing here, but what is being said on the streets is so different. Parents are having a hard time accessing resources. They're having a hard time finding who to even speak to regarding their students. So I'm wondering, is there anyone outside the teacher? Because sometimes they've spoken to the teacher several times and nothing is happening. So is there anyone else other than escalating it all the way to the superintendent, which they can't, do? Is there anyone else that they can contact?
Sorry to interrupt. My suggestion would be the school counselor. The school counselor is the general education, liaison might be the best word. And they sit on what we call, different buildings call it different things, like a child study team, intervention teams, that kind of thing. And they can usually, their job is to help navigate that. It looks like Carrie has something intelligent to say here.
Oh boy, I hope so. One of the things that I appreciate at the schools that I've worked at is that like you said earlier, it's not just a place. Special education is a part of a system. And so one hopes, and you're right, there's a learning growth to happen. But the counselor, the behavior health and wellness team, at the elementary school, the reading interventionists, if there is a concern that's brought them to the table, whether we found special education eligibility or not, we hope to be looking at what supports can help the student, whether that's a 504 or general education intervention or something else.
Okay, thank you.
Sunita?
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation and the work that you all do. It's a tough job. My question is that, parents, as Jugana said, the parents know their kids the best. If a parent has already gone to another professional and gotten reports and stuff, how much does that weigh in your evaluation for referral? And do you guys give, when a parent comes to you, any support systems, like maybe there is a list of professionals that they can go to make this process more streamlined for them? Do you want to?
Yeah, so any time that a family comes with outside evaluation and there's results, that's great information. And so we as a school team, we look at it and we determine what does that look like within the school setting, and what information is, if we decide to move forward with an evaluation, what additional information might be missing. I think it could be a lot of times outside evaluations don't have the input from the teacher, but they have great input from the family. So that's great, right? We just now have other components. How do we alongside with the evaluation? I think kind of going back to like the myths of special education, just because there is an outside evaluation or because there is something, we also want to make sure that we are still looking at the student and the individual within the context of the classroom. And I think that's where we come together, and we're also teasing that piece out as well.
Do you have any help for a parent, you know, who is just beginning to notice their child going through this? Maybe the counselors, do they have any resources? Like if a parent wants to help go to a doctor or a professional, do you have a list of people that you guys say, okay, this is a good person that you could go to outside before having a referral?
That wouldn't come from the special education department, but our school social workers manage that. Our counselors manage that. Our BHW teams, I can say, coming from a middle school lens, our school social worker had resources both for evaluations, parenting support, ADHD support, those kind of things. But it wouldn't probably come from the special education department, only because that would be a little bit like predetermining eligibility, and that would be a dicey slope legally for us to do. So before evaluation, before identification, our school study teams partner to do those resources.
But you would look at if they have already gone to professional and
Of
gotten a
course,
report and
yes.
stuff.
All
Okay.
outside evaluations are considered, and oftentimes, if a parent has done outside evaluations, it makes it so we don't have to do as many. Most of the time, you can't do evaluations, like the same evaluation in a certain amount of time. So it might prevent or keep us from having to do a certain evaluation because it was already done.
Okay.
So it
Thank
does
you.
inform.
Just wanted to note the time, but I want to let Justice, Tammy?
Thank you, Carrie. That example was great, and I appreciate you stepping through that. And maybe this question is for Carrie and Anya. I did hear from a parent just this week, as kindergartner was suspended, and also heard through the grapevine that maybe we have a handful of kindergarten suspensions. That's heartbreaking to me. So 2 questions. Do we have enough resources? Like, it just feels like that's too many kindergartens. One is too many. The index case, the one that reached out to me, the other parent was not interested in further testing and seeking anything. And so maybe, Anya, you can talk about how those or Carrie, how those conversations go. Look, we recognize that your kid, there's 19 referrals, this isn't working, we can work with a plan, and a parent says, not interested. So that seems like it's a hard stop for you guys, and how do you navigate that?
We live in a big district, so I can only talk about my own experience. But for me, I meet every Tuesday with our BH&W team, which is our counselor, our social worker, our academic coach. And if I have a meeting like that, I would ask those people, at least one of them, to come to the meeting, so that regardless of if we are moving forward with special education, we're thinking about how we can support the kid.
Justice?
I'll answer it really quick, and you can maybe follow up. My question was along those lines, of just around my experience has been historically there is a challenging social stigma around either acknowledging the potential need for special ed services, getting designation, and maybe what that means, what the larger implications. Some of those are cultural, some of those are related to class, economic perceptions, whatever have you. I guess my question, and this is maybe something we can add for after the fact, is there any resources just around that would be useful for folks to understand special ed as a concept? Either videos, something either the state or others provide, something we can make public in one of our things so folks can do their own study on why this is important.
So actually, we just today made live on the special education website on the Beaverton website a resource for families, and we are going to continue expanding on it. But it has just recalling what I talked about today. It's got all of our disability categories and explanations about what those mean. And it's in multiple languages. And then there is a flow chart essentially of what we just presented on the intervention stage through referral to evaluation and eligibility, and then the IEP process, also in multiple languages, and it will be accompanied by video. And then we are also building a YouTube channel that will provide information and support.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much. Well, thank you so much for that presentation to help us learn more about the process and for allowing us to ask those questions, and looking forward to the videos and that information that you shared and getting that out to families. So with that, I close the February 11th, 2025 work session of the Beaverton School Board, adjourned at 7:03.